Greetings, gardeners. Today's show is about the Mysore raspberry. Is it a friend or a foe? Berries are part of my childhood. I cannot separate myself from raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, gooseberries. Now that I live here in Hawaii, I can manage to grow some blueberries, some blackberries, and now finally one raspberry. I've tried numerous of the basic mainland garden varieties like Falls Gold or Indian Summer here, and they fail. There's something about the area that they just don't like. But then one day, a friend came by with a cutting, bare root cutting of a Mysore raspberry. That's a raspberry, black raspberry, that's native to India, Himalayas, goes on down, I guess, through South Asia, and I understand even into Malaysia this plant exists. It is truly a tropical form of the black raspberry. Now, people who live in the eastern United States, you all know all about black raspberries because they're native there. Most folks who live west of the Rockies, when you say black raspberry, unless they've been growing it in the garden, they automatically think, oh, blackberry. But no, black raspberries and blackberries are different things. They're in the same family together and in the same genus, but they're totally different. The flavor's different. Basically, the black raspberry is a raspberry with a black color and a slightly deeper, more exotic flavor, and it pulls off the stem the same way a red raspberry does. Now, we have a number of raspberries here in Hawaii. There is a native form that I have seen. It's not overly productive. There's a Florida raspberry that got in here, and it's a weed. It doesn't seem to be too virulent, but it's a weed. It makes a red fruit. And again, it's not very productive. There's the Himalayan raspberry got here. Now, it's not the Himalayan blackberry. We got that too. But the Himalayan raspberry is a gold berry. It actually tastes pretty good, but the plants get up, 15, 20 feet high. They are so thorny that if you get embedded in one, they'll never get you out again. And it's very unproductive too. At least down here at 1,600 feet, the neighbor had some as weeds in their yard, and no, I've never seen a fruit on it down here. Up in Volcano, at the rim of Kilauea, I have actually picked them while hiking. But they're an invasive species. There's also a form of thimbleberry that got here. It's not productive, but it's an invasive species. And the county's been after that one with trucks and tank sprayers, so they're on the warpath. Now, Mysore is also on the list with invasive species. Okay, I generally don't do this, but it's like just about any sort of a rubus or, a blackberry, raspberry that you're going to bring here technically could become an invasive species because birds like to eat them. And they carry the seeds all over the island. Best suggestion, try to keep the birds off. B, destroy your plantings and start them over again annually. This plant right here behind me is a Mysore that was a cutting maybe a year and a half ago. I'm not exactly positive on the date, but it wasn't long. I know it was barely a year ago that I put it out here in this garden spot. And the plant is now just loaded. See? Regular old raspberry, huh? Pick some of these right here. I see the birds got after a few of them. Bummer. But that's the way it goes, I guess. There we go. Hungry Planet Blues. Everybody wants to eat. So, those of you who know the black raspberry, you'll be familiar with the taste. The Mysore It's not quite as intense, that undertone the black raspberry has, but it's just as sweet. It's really good. It's really good. In fact, I'd say this is probably so far the most successful berry I have grown here. Good stuff. Fruit forms at the tips of every little stemlet, all the way down this thing. The count on how many berries do we have, no idea. No idea. It's a lot. And they start from the bottom of the plant, ripening. So I've been picking off the bottom down here first, and then working my way up. Eventually, I'll get to stand up while I'm picking. But as you can see, this thing's got some pretty stout thorns in it. It's pretty wicked, and it wouldn't be so bad except the backs of the leaves also have barbs on them, and so if you reach in there, you can get hooked on the underside of those leaves, and it's not very much fun. I call it wishful thinking on my part, but I will be taking seeds from this plant, and I'm going to go ahead and start planting them in mass in my nursery. And when I get tiny little plants, I'll begin inspecting them for thornlessness. And when I start to find some seedlings that don't make as big a thorns as the usual run does, I'm going to start to regrow from those. I'll maybe pull the old Luther Burbank. The way he got the spines off his Opuntia cactus was to tell the cactus he'd protect it. They didn't have to worry anymore. They were okay. They can get rid of their needles, and they claim it happened. Oh man, these things are delicious. It's worth it. It is. Also, because the plant is so precocious, so productive, I really do. I plan to use this plant out here in the garden very much like a tomato. I'm going to root cuttings, put them out in the fall, let them overwinter. Spring and summer comes, they'll start to make a crop. And when I've had more than enough of these berries, I'm going to go ahead and just chop the whole works down, kill it, and start new cuttings so this thing doesn't get out of control. I want to keep the plants no bigger than what you see back here, which is already head high first growing season. It's the other reason I love berries. It's because most berry types, whether it's strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, they're about the fastest fruit there is to produce a crop. This is probably one of the fastest berries I have ever seen to produce this much fruit on one single plant. It's staggering. But the strawberry, for instance, we plant it in the spring and there'll be something by the fall, definitely big crop by the next year. Most raspberries and blackberries will usually do something similar. You can get something in the second year. And so for those of you who just don't have the time to wait for those Fuyu persimmons, or Mame sapote or whatever you're waiting for, try planting some berries. Berries also go back to my childhood because growing up in the Midwest, depending on what part we were at, was in Indiana or in the Pine Barrens in Wisconsin or, along the railroad tracks near Chicago, we'd have all sorts of different berries. And the black raspberry was very common in Illinois. In Indiana and in Wisconsin, in the sandy areas, the blueberry and the huckleberry were really common. We had dewberries. We had blackberries. Illinois had great crops of the Himalayan blackberry that's a horror in Oregon. Anyway, we had all these berries, and as a kid, I couldn't resist. I'd go out with a basket, and I'd, pick berries, and then bring these berries back to the kitchen. And, well, if I bring blueberries to my aunts in Wisconsin, they'd fire up the old wood stove and start to make some blueberry pies. Oh, man. The smell of the wood smoke and the pie dough. And, my stepfather, he just loved it when I brought him berries to make wine with. Some of the finest wine he ever made came from Midwestern black raspberry. Blackberry wine was also a killer too. Yeah, so I got history with him. I can't get away from him. But if you do get involved with the Mysore, don't let it get away from you. Aloha.